And we are live. Folks, welcome into the Cover One Roundup. I am your irregular host, David Fox, here with me, joining me at the last possible moment I could someone. We have one of our newest additions to the Cover One crew, Joe DeRosa, and we also have one of our wonderful mainstays, Uber Hansen. Fellas, how you doing tonight?
Good.
Doing good, man.
Appreciate you both joining me. And we are going to be talking about a couple different things tonight. We're going to be focusing on the combine. We're going to be talking about some of the changes, obviously, with Leslie Frazier leaving, what that means for the Bills coaching staff and the defense as a whole, blah, 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 all that wonderful, amazing stuff. But before we get to all of that, we have some things that we need to do, some things we need to read. And one of those involves one of our lovely sponsors, and that is Underdog Fantasy. Now, in your home league this past season, did you get to draft Josh Allen? If you didn't, then you can still use Underdog Fantasy's Pick'em contest during the regular season, where you can predict if Josh Allen's going to go over his yard totals, his touchdowns, completions, more. If you think Allen to Diggs will blow up this week, because that's apparently the Bills' only option at wide receiver and offensive weapon, according to most Bills fans. Although, he might be a Dallas Cowboy next week, so who knows? You can put them both in your pick'em and predict up to 5 different over-unders. And if you're correct, you can win 20 times your original money. Use promo code COVER1, that's the number 1, when signing up to make your first deposit, and Underdog will match that deposit up to $100. That is 100 free US dollars if you use promo code COVER1. Sign up today and start winning today. In addition, that is not our only sponsor, unfortunately, because I would love for that to be the only ad read I have to do tonight. But we are also sponsored by you, the lovely people who subscribe using Cover One Pass. It's our subscription service that will get you some in-depth premium content. Greg, who does the salary cap extravaganza every year, has a whole bunch of stuff regarding the salary cap, how it all works, all the weird, stupid that go for just $57 a year. You'll have access to that type of additional exclusive articles and content. This is also in addition to the Cover One Slack channel, which is a group of fans just like you who love the Bills and also do other things with their lives, like talk about community and politics, if that's your thing. For what averages out to under $5 a month, you'll have access to the best analytical Bills content anywhere on the World Wide Web. And that is Cover One Pass. You also get this little shirt and a decal, if that's also your thing. So go to cover1.football and become a Cover One insider today. And if you thought that was the end, you're still wrong, because we have our wonderful friend and colleague, Greg Thompson, who's going to tell us about BetUS.
Hey guys, Cover One is excited to announce our new partnership with BetUS. BetUS has a live wagering on all major games, the best betting variety in the business, and an easy deposit and withdrawal process with the fastest payouts in the industry. Our loyal Cover One fans get a choice between 2 exclusive offers, either a 125% sign-up bonus on your first deposit up to $2,500, or a free $50 bet with no deposit required. Just use promo code COVER1 on the links provided in the show description below. BetUS, where the game begins.
Thank you so much, Greg. We are always so fortunate to have you on our podcast each and every week. Now that that's all taken care of, we're just going to jump right into it. And we're going to talk about the biggest news regarding the Bills last week. And that was the very sudden departure of longtime defensive coordinator Leslie Frazier. Frazier had been with the Bills since McDermott came onto the staff as the head coach in 2017. He was the defensive coordinator immediately. And, obviously someone who has come under a lot of criticism in the last few years for how the Bills have left the playoffs. And there's been talk about, whether the scheme itself was dated, whether there were too many things going on behind the scenes with trying to get, too many things, in the playoffs in particular, too many things for the defensive guys to put together, Guys, I just want to kind of get your general gauge on this. Joe, what's your initial takeaway when you saw Frazier was going to be taking a year off from coaching?
Right. So when I found out that news, and I said this on the Spaces this past Friday, I wasn't elated, but I definitely wasn't disappointed. I believed in Leslie Frazier. I believed in him as a coordinator. I defended his ability to be a coach as well as a head coach in this league. But I definitely think as time passes, as you move on in the league, as the years go by, sometimes change is a good thing. Sometimes it can revitalize the people on your defense. It can make you make the tough decisions that maybe change how your defense runs. And in this case, and what we found out about McDermott potentially being the play caller, it is going to make that change happen for the Bills defense where you're getting continuity, but you might see some new wrinkles, especially with Holcomb being an advisor to McDermott. I'm not upset about it, but I'm not going to celebrate it because I do think Frazier got a bad shake by a lot of the fan base, by a lot of people in general. The numbers weren't great in the playoffs, but when you get to the playoffs, you play much tougher offenses. Your competition level spikes. And while they had the benefit of playing Skylar Thompson in round 1 this year, they didn't get that luxury when they faced Joe Burrow in the Bengals round 2. And while, yes, there were absolutely things that you could say were Frazier's fault, maybe some of the play calling was a little bit soft. Maybe there were certain situations where X would have worked instead of Y, but he's not fully to blame. And I think when you evaluate Leslie Frazier as a whole, you have to talk about things like injuries, which played a huge part of this season and ended up stifling a lot of defensive production, especially in the playoffs. If you're going up against good offenses, you don't want a third string safety. You don't want both of your starting D tackles to be slightly injured or coming off major injuries. Jordan Phillips was playing with a torn labrum. Daquan Jones had a calf injury. Ed Oliver now is getting the double team. And Ed Oliver, who I think is a great player, is now being double teamed, is undersized, can't make it happen, and your DNs aren't doing anything. I don't think it's all to be blamed on Frazier. However, I do think with him gone, it could be some change for the defense that maybe the division, maybe the rest of the AFC isn't totally used to. And there could be good that comes from that, but that's to be seen.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to echo Joe on a lot of what he said here. I think that there's some sort of middle ground on this, right? I don't think it's a gigantic victory that the Bills moved on from Leslie Frazier, but I do think there's probably some sort of benefit to this. So just to start here, just to quote Tim Graham, because I thought this tweet was great. He said, much of the Bills fan reaction to Leslie Frazier has been pathetic. And I love that because I wholeheartedly agree with him. Like, people wanted to scapegoat somebody and they chose Leslie Frazier as the scapegoat. I don't think that that's necessarily fair. I do think that there were some issues. If you go to that Bengals game, there was that viral picture that came out of the Bills playing like 8 yards deep on a 3rd and 3 or something like that. And it was just an easy pass from Burrow to Chase. But at the same time, that game, I look at and I say, well, you got to expect your defensive line to at some point win their one-on-one battles against backup offensive linemen. And all day they couldn't win. So if Leslie Frazier went into that game assuming that that could happen, I completely agree with his assumption. The fact that the players weren't capable of doing it is more on the players than Frazier. At the same time, maybe moving on from Leslie Frazier is the right choice at this point. Sean McDermott calling the plays, I tend to like that. Like, I think that Sean McDermott has such a grasp on his players and such a grasp on the defensive side of the ball that there's a benefit there. And more so, I think that Sean McDermott's proven to be like this defensive back guru throughout his career. You look at people like Josh Norman, Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer, Trey White, were all pros under Sean McDermott. I'm thinking that could be the missing ingredient, like McDermott actually calling the plays, pushing his defensive backs up. You bring Micah Hyde back. You have your safety blanket there. There's some benefit here, but at the same time, I don't think that it's necessarily guaranteed it's going to be better. It could be worse. And Leslie Frazier was an integral part of this team since 2017. So at a minimum, you're losing continuity.
Yeah. I would generally agree with what you guys said here. I think that there was definitely something had to change. It didn't necessarily need to be like, sweeping changes, get rid of this whole side of the ball's staff and, bring in a whole new system and scheme, blah, 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 blah. That would have been an obviously major overreaction. But I think that bare minimum, what you're getting with Leslie Frazier is a lot of stability and structure and a lot of leadership. There's a lot of these players that look up to and admire him and appreciate his sense of and his style of leadership. I mean, Jordan Phillips talked about it last year when he came back to Buffalo about how, one of the biggest reasons he came back to Buffalo and one of the reasons he felt that he credited his success in Buffalo to was to Leslie Frazier, because he just, was willing to talk to him and spend time with him to really get to know and understand, figure out how to with Jordan Phillips, who, in his other stops in the NFL, hasn't necessarily had that same sort of relationship with coaches. So you kind of just wonder what may or may not be missing from that side of things in terms of Leslie Frazier. But the other side of it, of course, is you look at this defense when everything is going right, it's great, right? Like when everyone's healthy, when you're able to disguise these coverages and rotate guys, it works really, really well. And when you have all pro guys like Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer who are able to rotate their coverages and move down and work with what they're able to do, it's much easier to just sort of say, yeah, let's just rush 4 and do that. And, we'll put Tremaine and Milano in coverage because they're both great in coverage. But when things start to hit the fan and you start getting a lot of injuries, something's going to have to change, and resimplifying things is not really the answer. And, maybe that's what was really happening. That was just sort of the sense that I got throughout the season, was that it just sort of became more and more simplified. And they were also still asking a lot of DBs that weren't really capable of making those sorts of plays that Poyer and Hyde were going to be able to make. And of course, Poyer was basically duct taped together by the end of the season.
Yeah.
But it's tough to be able to look at that, and especially the way it all ended is sort of what leaves people with such a bad taste in their mouth. Obviously, not just losing to Cincinnati, but just sort of looking listless and lifeless the entire time, and knowing going into that game that they had 3 of their starting offensive line out, and the Bills defense just kind of got their ass whipped the entire time by these backups, and then immediately the next week we see Kansas City just absolutely tearing apart that offensive line. You're just like, yes, that was what was supposed to happen. So that goes back to your point about Leslie Frazier probably very rightfully assumed that the front 4 was going to be able to attack a very weak offensive line, and they just weren't able to do it. And if that isn't working, then your whole thing, everything just sort of falls apart.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
on top of that, though, the offense only scored 10 points. That's one thing that people almost never talk about when they bring up the Bengals game. It's like, yeah, the defense looked bad. They did not look good. The offense looked bad too. So it's got to blame has to be applied to both sides, in my opinion. The reason that fans in general will not apply blame to the offense more often than not is because you cannot criticize Josh Allen. If you criticize him, you might as well not be a fan anymore, according to some people. So that's the one thing that kind of got to me with all this Frazier discourse is it's always Frazier's fault. It's always the defense's fault. And I'm like, there's certain cases where it's been the offense. Even you go to that Dolphins game, the defense won that game, in my opinion. Josh Allen had 3 turnovers, and one of them turned into a touchdown. The other 2 I believe both turned into points on short drives. That defense won that game. Granted, they should have won that game because you're playing Skylar Thompson. But at the same time, you got to give the defense credit where credit's due, and you got to blame the offense when the offense should be blamed. And in that Bengals game, at least for me, I look at the Bills offense, I look at the Bills defense, both were bad. That's why they lost the game.
But blame has many heads. You can't just go with one individual unless it's, the most glaring flaw. If Allen threw a game-ending pick 6, or like the Vikings game, Allen throws a game-ending interception. That's Josh Allen's fault. They lost that game. Even though they got to that point, they lost it because of Josh Allen, literally because he threw the game-ending play. But in a game like the Bengals game, you're right. It's offense needs to get so much more flack than they did. It's not to say that the defense didn't deserve any, but you have to point the blame everywhere. And when I was at a packed bar when that game happened, and all I was hearing was, slandering of Frazier. It was all about Frazier. I'm not joking. And when that happens, it's just your emotion. And when you react emotionally, logic gets trumped. And you're going to look for the most glaring, obvious thing that you could point to blame and to call out and to say it's bad and you need it removed. It wasn't just Frazier. It never had just been Frazier. There is blame for him, but not exclusively.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep, I would agree with all that. It's going to be interesting to see exactly what happens. I think that, McDermott taking over as the defensive play caller and really handling that side of the ball, I think that all tracks. I think that all makes sense. There's part of me that's excited to see what that actually looks like. There's part of me excited to see like what kind of changes there will be. It probably won't be like huge wholesale changes, in terms of like suddenly they're going to become this big, heavy blitzing type of team. That being said, I sure would like for them to be, because McDermott basically came up under Jim Johnson in Philadelphia, and Jim Johnson was a big, heavy blitz type of guy. And that is the sort of thing that I would just love to see McDermott do more and more. I don't know if that's ever actually going to happen. But it would be exciting to just see a little more creativity, whether that's some more creative blitzes or even just like simulated pressures and different stunts. You got to be able to play games within the game, right? Like you got to be able to. You can't just sit there in nickel 98% of the time, too high safety, whatever look you want to give them, and just sort of run the same sort of stuff over and over and over again and expect it to always work. Because most of the time it is going to work, because most of the time you have the talent to beat anyone, and everyone's been in this scheme for long enough that they know how all the checks work. They know how to rotate this. They know how to move this. They know how to pass things off. But when you start getting into better teams, and especially against better coaches who know how to attack those particular coverages and know how to work against your communication and use it against you, suddenly you're not in the best place in the world. And you're already behind, and then you start to press more and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the sort of thing that I want to be able to look at this defense and say, like, okay, this looks different. This looks different. It's still the same defense. There's still going to be a very nickel heavy defense. There's still going to be a very zone heavy type of defense. This is the way this defense has been built. But they're bringing these sorts of blitzes a little bit more often. They're bringing sims and creepers a little bit better. They're using their stunts a little better and that sort of thing. The games within the game, that's what I want to see a little bit more of, rather than just sort of going straight up vanilla and sort of, banking exclusively on your talent to win this.
I agree. One thing I wanted to just mention too is I think what happened as well is the way their scheme runs, at least from my perspective, and you guys can feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, but they really like hitting home with 4-man rushes. They like making sure that they can drop as many people back into coverage as they can. When you have the personnel that can generate pressure up front, that's going to work. Absolutely. And it was working early in the year because everyone was healthy. I think it's too fickle of an approach. And it was one that you want to set up with guys like Patrick Mahomes, who can easily beat blitzes or can easily take advantage of when you bring more pressure and leave the coverage exposed. I think the problem is, though, that it's too easy for that scheme to be exploited when the talent goes down. That's my problem with it. And that's something I'd like to see them, you're right, add in more wrinkles, add in more blitzes or something, because when you have that and you make your defense a little less predictable because they know that you're going to start bringing more pressure and you're not going to know when it's coming, I think that's going to make it much harder for teams to game plan for the Bills defense and play into their hand a bit more where they can drop back into coverage because the threat of the blitz is there.
For sure.
Yeah, I think we, like, as fans, we often talk about the offensive side of the ball and calling it too vanilla. Like, that was a thing people choose to forget. When Brian Daboll was the offensive coordinator of the Bills, a lot of times I heard people say, well, Brian Daboll's too vanilla. Fast forward now, people want Daboll back. That's a whole different story. But the defensive side of the ball at times is too vanilla. atypical. It's the same thing over and over and over again. And at some point in time, someone like Patrick Mahomes, like Joe Burrow, is going to beat that. Like you're just not going to win on a consistent basis against high level talent, especially when you start losing players like Micah Hyde for the year or Von Miller for the year, or you have an injured Matt Milano, an injured Jordan Poyer playing very important roles in that defense. So yeah, Joe, I completely agree. Like that when the talent goes down, at least there has to be some sort of shift. Like you have to start trying to do different things. And the Bills kind of didn't do that. I do have one question. Actually, David brought up a really good point I didn't think about. One of the main reasons Jordan Phillips came back was because of Leslie Frazier. Leslie Frazier is now gone. Jordan Phillips is not under contract. Do we think that affects Phillips coming back, or do we still assume that he's going to be a Bill next season?
I get the sense I don't really know what Jordan Phillips' market would be. I don't know how much he actually wants to leave Buffalo, period. I imagine that, even though Leslie Frazier played a big part in why he wanted to come back to Buffalo, I would have to imagine that, his feelings towards McDermott are at least similar, maybe not quite as strong, but, this is easily the most successful place he's been, right? Just he was in Miami, got claimed by Buffalo, and then went to Arizona and couldn't go there. And then came back to Buffalo. I mean, this is the most success that he's had just in terms of winning, being a part of a winning team, but also the most success that he's had just as a player, and being productive and all that sort of stuff. I would be a little hard pressed to see him outside of Buffalo. I'm not sitting here and saying that he's like some sort of priority free agent that they need to bring back for sure. It would be fine if they did for like a cheap deal. But I do think that it would be, I'd be a little surprised if he'd left Buffalo. I don't, and maybe somebody gives him a nice deal, but I can't really see that happening because he has been hurt and played a lot of the season hurt. It's not like he's been some sort of Iron Man either. I mean, he plays through injury. We're not doubting like toughness or anything like that. But yeah, it's just the fact that he has been injured before, and it's obviously affected his play before because it's an injury. It's going to affect your play somewhat. So I'm not exactly sure. I would lean towards he probably tries to test free agency. If somebody gives him a nice enough deal, he'd probably leave, but I don't necessarily see that happening. So I would imagine he comes back to Buffalo on a relatively cheap contract.
Yeah,
tend to agree.
He came back on a 1 year prove it and didn't really prove it. Like as much as he would have liked to. I think I agree with that. I think he'll maybe like go into the market, see if he can get something, maybe a 2 year deal, maybe something like it's a few more million, but I just don't foresee that happening. The shoulder injury, the number of injuries he went through this year and his career, honestly, are factors that I think would limit his market and probably make him more inclined to just stay with the team and the scheme.
Yep, I would agree with that. So with that all done and said, let's move on to the event, the main event before the actual draft, in the whole draft process, which is the NFL Combine that took place this weekend. Obviously, this is where you get all these fun selection. You get a bunch of interviews, and it's a place where beat guys can be able to talk to coaches. Sometimes, for the first time. I mean, I don't know, or at least maybe for a second time, if you were a recent hire like a Jonathan Gannon or Shane Steichen, blah, 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 you have your introductory press conference, and then likely the combine is the second time you're able to talk to these guys. And they're able to do player interviews and all that good stuff. So, this was actually when Brandon Beane was able to about Frazier and basically said last week we kind of thought Leslie Frazier was going to be our defensive coordinator, and now he's not. So that was and it is interesting comparing like a Beane press conference to a McDermott press conference, where Beane is more willing to just sort of say something very plainly, and give a little bit of his process, whereas McDermott just gives you the same sort of robotic, like, yeah, I'm not going to give you a single damn thing if I can help it. But regardless of that, I mean, this is a big event. It's where a lot of teams get it's an information gathering. Where teams are able to talk to players, are able to see them perform on the field, get some athletic measurements, and obviously do a lot of medical tests, which is sort of the original purpose of the combine. I don't know how many people actually know that, but they just wanted them to all come together and do a bunch of medical tests, so they all had a sort of like standard set that they didn't have to be like, yeah, Ohio State's doctor said this, but yeah. So I don't know. We're just gonna go through sort of our standouts. If there were any disappointments, if there were guys that we wanted to see a little bit more of, blah 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 blah. It's the usual kind of that sort of stuff. So Joe, I'm gonna kick it to you first. Who was a standout for you, or a couple of standouts if you want?
Yeah, so I got a little list here, but I'll just name my favorites. I'll start with DJ Turner, lightning quick. I mean, when I did a couple really early mock drafts and I was reading up on him a little bit, but seeing him on the 40 was awesome. And, just nice to see him kind of raise his draft stock a little bit. If Dane Jackson doesn't come back, or if the RFA tender gets met by a different team, I'm into looking at him in a later round. So that was one. Got to talk about Blake Freeland, dude. That was crazy. What was it? The highest vert jump ever for an O-lineman. What was it? I have it at 37.5. That is crazy. And I checked, and he ranked first in every stat except his 40, which I think he came in second in. So Sue's an athletic freak. Obviously, again, we talk about the combine, we talk about these guys' athletics, but it's not totally going to translate to the field. And I know his Senior Bowl, people were saying he needed work. He didn't look polished, kind of sloppy, but that's an impressive day. And then final one, I'll give the most obvious answer here. Anthony Richardson. I mean, that was just crazy, dude. How? That's all I'm going to say. I'm not even going to elaborate. Just how? ? Done.
Yeah. Blake Freeland from the offensive tackle from BYU. He's somebody that I think just sort of, off the cuff kind of just makes you think of like a Spencer Brown, where like, big, tall, lean, athletic type, but obviously needs a lot of work. And for a team, at least in relation to Bills and what they're probably going to be looking for, because obviously they're I would imagine they're going to be looking for offensive line help, because that's probably one of, if not the biggest weakness or glaring weakness for this team, at least in my opinion. I don't imagine someone like that being on their radar, but also this is exactly the type of player that has been on their radar in the past, because they like to take all these very, athletic, whether that's a Spencer Brown or a Josh Allen or a Tremaine Edmonds or Greg Rousseau. Like, this is their sort of type of guy. And if you look at like Aaron Cromer and his sort of arc, or one particular for interior offensive line, because I think that's probably what they're looking more at. He really likes guys that are like 6'4" plus, guys that are like 320 plus pounds, former tackles, turn them into guards. Freeland, but and obviously former tackle. Maybe they kick him into guard if they ended up drafting him. I don't think that's actually the case, but this is obviously somebody that is going to get a lot of looks by a lot of different teams just because of that pure athleticism. That's definitely an interesting one, and an interesting one to keep an eye on. And with DJ Turner, I mean, you kind of feel like every year this team's going to take a defensive back. And if they take one with 4.2640, I'll take that. You're not gonna hear me complain about that. And then with Anthony Richardson, I mean, my God, a lot of these, the quarterback class has been talked about a lot, because it's the quarterback class. They're always going to be talked about a lot, but there seems to be this sense that guys, that there's, Bryce Young and CJ Stroud in one bucket, and then Anthony Richardson and Will Levis in another. Young and Stroud are more polished as passers. Levis and Richardson have more of that raw ability and toolsiness that you want to see. And Richardson just absolutely brings the best tools, I think. I mean, it's kind of crazy to just look at this dude and realize the absolute rare athlete that you're getting with someone like him. This is going to be one of those guys where it really matters a lot where he ends up going. Because if he goes to a place where he has to start right away, it's probably going to be pretty ugly to start. If he go to maybe Seattle, who just re-signed Geno Smith to a 3-year contract, and like $52 million of that is going to be in the first year, kind of seems to signal to me that they're probably going to look at quarterbacks pretty closely in this draft and just say like, hey, you're going to be the guy in the future. Because right now we can be competitive with Geno Smith. And I would be that to me would be a great place for someone like a Will Levis or an Anthony Richardson, where he can just sit back, not worry about things, let this team continue to grow and build, and then just learn and learn and learn. And that I think that would be an ideal situation for guys like Richardson and Levis. Uber, who do you got?
So full disclosure, I'm a little outside of my depth here, right? Like, I'm not the biggest college football fan. Really not a college football fan at all, to be honest. And I don't really dig into these guys too much until after free agency, just because the Bills, for all I know, could re-sign Tremaine Edmonds and Jordan Poyer and then go out and get Ben Powers in some mystical world. And then suddenly any research I've done at right guard, middle linebacker, and safety on prospects is kind of for naught. But regardless, that's kind of how I approached the research for this show in particular. Is I looked at positions, and my 3 top positions are right guard, middle linebacker, and safety. That's where the Bills need help right now today. So I kind of look there. So just starting at guards, like a guy that interests me more after seeing him at the combine, and I think a lot of people know this name, is Cody Mauch out of North Dakota State. Like, the guy's missing 2 front teeth. He's the exact kind of guy I want in the middle of my offensive line. Just a big bruiser that kind of looks like a goofball, but from everything I read on him, he can beat the living snot out of anyone in front of him. I do have some concern, though, coming from North Dakota State. Like, how will that transition go now playing in the NFL? But every single thing I read, every single thing I saw said he's an offensive tackle. He doesn't quite have the arm length to play that position in the pros. He's probably going to kick inside the guard, but at a minimum, there's some position versatility there, which the Bills love. So at least at guard, I was kind of looking at Cody Mauch, and he measured very well, at least at RAS, at that position. At linebacker, there's a little bit of kind of a weird situation for me. So for linebackers in Sean McDermott's scheme, I got to find a big guy. Tremaine Edmonds was a big, long-arm guy. Luke Kuechly, people forget, was 6'3" and had 31-inch arms. Yep. So not the longest arms, but he was long in the middle, and both were freak athletes. So you need somebody like that. You can't go get again, I'm just looking at a few prospects. I don't know all too much about him, but like Dayan Henley, he's about 6 feet tall, 33-inch arms. That's a little too small, I think, for a Sean McDermott defense. So 2 guys I looked at. One, Jack Campbell. The guy's an absolute monster. I think he had over 100 tackles last year, but he measured extremely well from a physical standpoint. He has a 9.98 RAS, relative athletic score. At MathBomb came up with that. And I believe that's higher than Tremaine Edmonds. So he's a better athlete than Tremaine Edmonds and just a little bit smaller than Edmonds. And the other guy, which I found really interesting, was Drew Sanders. He didn't actually compete at the combine. I guess he was dealing with a hamstring injury. But he seems to be that versatile piece, David, that you were kind of alluding to, that you kind of want the Bills to do more of, is have more of a blitz more often. And Drew Sanders, again, from everything I read, people were saying he might be better as an edge rusher than he is as a linebacker, but he can play both. So if you stick him into this defense, maybe that's kind of a missing piece the Bills have been, missing these past few years. And then the last group that I really dove into a little bit was safeties. And I was super underwhelmed by this. I even kind of looked at some corners to try to see if anybody could fill into those spots. And there wasn't really anybody outside of Brian Branch that really made much sense. Everything I read on Brian Branch said he's extremely intelligent. His football IQ is off the charts. And if there's one thing a safety needs in the Bills defense, it's intelligence and be able to fit into that scheme. Brian Branch fits that. Other guys I looked at was Antonio Johnson. His explosiveness was real bad. He only put up 8 reps on the bench, which is just not that great. I think in my prime, I could have put up more than 8 reps on the bench in my prime. And then Sidney Brown, I believe out of Syracuse, I looked at, and he's just too small. Like at 5'9", that's just too small for me to have a safety that's going to fill in Poyer's position. I just don't really know how that's going to work. So those were the 3 guys at those positions I looked at that impressed me. But one last guy I want to bring up, Darnell Washington. Like he had one hell of a combine. That one-handed catch he had was beautiful. I don't know if his 1 foot got in though, so I don't know if that's necessarily a catch. But yeah, he's an absolute physical freak, right up there with Anthony Richardson.
Yeah, I think super interesting. I mean, we the last couple of off seasons we've kind of been speculating pretty heavily, especially last off season, that the Bills were going to be running a lot more 12 personnel, that they were going to, especially after they signed O.J. Howard, it was kind of like, oh yeah, they're definitely leaning more towards 12 personnel. This is sort of like, this is the sort of thing that Ken Dorsey is running in Carolina. This is the sort of thing that Aaron Kromer did in L.A., or it's just done in general. This all sort of makes sense. And then they went out and were the same 11 personnel team that they've been in the last like 5 years, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But it's also a good indicator that, even though this tight end class has a lot of depth and is very intriguing, and I wouldn't be opposed to them taking a tight end, I would much prefer it to be on day 3 rather than, spending a value pick in the first 2 days on a second tight end that they're probably just not going to use. And you do still have Quentin Morris on the roster, who has shown to be like a solid enough player, especially as your second tight end. I think that's fine. So I don't really know. It's unfortunate that when a class is super deep, talent kind of just look at it as like, well, too bad for us because we're not going to look at that at all. And it doesn't really matter all that much. And maybe something changes in between now and the draft. There's plenty of things like free agency to go through. And we could sit here and say, well, they're never gonna take a tight end on the first 2 days. I probably said about linebacker last year before they took Terrell Bernard. And look what happened there. So yeah, it is what it is. And as far as going back to the safety discussion, I mean, this is a super interesting position, right? Because obviously this is a position in major flux for the Bills, right? You have Micah Hyde coming off of neck fusion surgery, which just on the face of it sounds very unpleasant. Not something that I want just in general for a person to have, but also definitely not a football player. That seems like not the thing that I would want a football player to have. Now, this was somebody who was like trying to come back to play in the playoffs, which to me, and obviously not happening, but this is he is very clearly intending to play high level football in 2023. I think that's fine. And I think that, unless something very strange happens, he will probably be the Micah Hyde that we've seen in years past. The real question is who is going to be next to him, right? Because you obviously, I think we all kind of safely assume that Jordan Poyer is out. Where he ends up going, who knows? You have DeMar Hamlin and his whole situation. Whatever happens there happens, right? I mean, he could just as easily come back and try and play as he could retire. And I wouldn't blame him for either one. But this is an interesting safety class, but there's not necessarily like a for sure standout type of guy where you're just like, that guy, that's the guy that they have to go and get. there's some interesting guys. I mean, you turn on like Sidney Brown's tape and you're like, wow, this dude can hit. This dude's aggressive. This dude's got the instincts. And then you see, oh, he's 5'9". So unless he's turning into the next Bob Sanders, I don't know what the odds of him being super successful are. You have someone like a Christopher Smith from Georgia, who we all saw at the Senior Bowl, really smart player, but the athletic ability was not quite where he wanted to be. And we're not just talking about 40-yard dash, right? Like he ran a 4.62. That's fine for a safety. You look at safeties that are in the NFL, like legit safeties in the NFL, guys like Marcus Williams, guys like, Kyle Hamilton last year, even in the past, like Malcolm Jenkins, even in Jarris Byrd. Jarris Byrd ran a 4.68 and was one of the rangiest safeties I've ever seen in my fucking life. So, for 4.6 type of 40. What I'm more concerned with is just like, he didn't do his 3-cone, he didn't do the 20-yard shuttle, which is fine. He's probably going to do it as pro day. But then you look at that, if that ends up being kind of average E, what does that really say about him? He's also 5'11", 192, not the best size. It's not like super undersized or anything. Like we're not talking about, somebody who is going to have a ton of struggles just because he's 5'11", 192. I would be perfectly happy if they took Chris Smith. I think he's a good player. It's just a question of, do you feel like this is going to be the guy that they want to play from day one? And do you feel like he's going to be successful from day one? And of course, the other aspect of this is they fired Nick Salgado, their safeties coach. They decide to bring in, my gosh, who is their current safeties coach? I'm going to have.
Is it Joe Dana?
Joe Dana.
Thank you, producers. So they bring in Joe Dana, who obviously, he was with the Texans last year. He was with the Jaguars when they went on their run in 2017, and they had that amazing defense, right? So there are connections, obviously, with certain free agents like Owens from Houston. You have Deshaun Gibson, who is available from San Dana in Jacksonville during that year. So there's veteran options available, and I would certainly like to see a veteran option at safety as well. But that you also need to think about the future, because not only can you not just like rely on some 1 year, 2 year option at option, but you also have to just think about the fact that Micah Hyde is also like just older in his own right. I mean, this is not some spring chicken, and it's not a spring chicken who's coming off of neck fusion surgery. So, you have to be able to think about the future of this team and be able your safeties coach, presumably because you wanted someone who's going to develop a safety, not just like get the current safeties that have been there for years and years, like Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde. Bring in someone that you feel comfortable with developing a safety of the future. And maybe that is a Christopher Smith. Maybe it's not. Who knows? But I mean, to me, I would feel pretty comfortable with somebody like Christopher Smith. But I think overall, the safety class has a lot of depth, but there's no like major standout, right? I'd love to see a major standout and take them very, very high. But it just doesn't seem like that is what's being at the moment. Going into the offensive line, which is sort of what we started this whole discussion with Uber. We can. So you have Mitch Morse at center, right? You have Deion Dawkins at left tackle. You have Ryan Bates, who you signed to an extension last year. And then you have Ike Butker, yay. And you have Spencer Brown, who obviously struggled greatly last year. I mean, he was a liability. And it's a shame because I was really looking forward to seeing Spencer Brown, such an Aaron Cromer type of player. But Brown was obviously dealing with an injury before training camp. He was dealing with some sort of injury during the season. It's not easy to play offensive line when you're just always banged up. But I do think that you can't necessarily sit there and say that Spencer Brown is for sure going to tackle forward, and we're totally comfortable and okay with that. I just don't see how you can say that with a straight face. And I think at bare minimum, you need to bring in some other veteran option, whoever that is. And you need to be able to look at the draft and stands out, or if there's just somebody high on your board that falls, I think you just got to take that guy and pull the trigger, because worst comes to worst, maybe this right tackle that you have, this rookie that you have compete, maybe he's not a right tackle, but maybe he's your answer at right guard. And then you move Ryan Bates over to left guard, where he's played before and was actually pretty successful. That was actually where he played when he came in 2021 and played super well down the stretch. He was, in my opinion. So I would feel much more comfortable about left guard if you have Ryan Bates there instead of the turnstile Pro Bowler that is Roger Saffold. But obviously you have, if you have an offensive line that looks like Dawkins, Bates, Morse, some sort of rookie, maybe a veteran to start, and then Spencer Brown / whoever ends up winning that right tackle spot, I feel a whole lot better about that than what they were rolling out last year, because it became pretty clear pretty early on that Roger Saffold just didn't have what he needed in the tank.
The crazy thing is, like, going into this year, I thought they figured it out, at least for 1 year. I thought you got Roger Saffold, like, coming off a Pro Bowl season. Not that the Pro Bowl means anything, but that has to be an improvement. Like, he has to be better than what we've had, and he wasn't. Mm-hmm. And then the whole entire rest of the offensive line just never really lived up to, like, I don't have the exact stats in front of me, but Josh Allen, to me, and not, again, I know that this is true, like, he wasn't under more pressure this year by the metrics, but Allen seemed to be under pressure on every single snap as the season went along. Like, the further we got into the season, the more the pressure was coming. And it wasn't something where it was a timing issue where he wasn't getting the ball out in time. He would step back, and then there's just a guy in his lap he had to run. Every single play against the Bengals, he was doing that. It's crazy. Like, the Bills actually had a good plan on how to address this, and it just didn't work. So now they're going to have to redo it in a different way, hopefully. And there's a very good chance it might not work again, or maybe it will work this time.
Yeah. I want to add on to the Saffold talk real fast, because when he came to the team, I was really encouraged by the fact that he was predominantly known as a very good run blocker. And it seemed like he didn't really have his bearings on either side of the protection, whether it was pass blocking or run blocking. I do think when it comes to him, and also when it comes to Spencer Brown, that we could get something out of them in a more limited role. And which is why I think it's more important that you address offensive line, whether it's free agency or the draft, because you're going to allow these guys to kind of not be asked to do too much. And I know they're professionals, these are grown men, athletes. Spencer Brown, being as athletic as he is, you want him to be that cornerstone right tackle. But my personal view is this team has a championship window open in front of them, and your most valuable asset is Josh Allen. The people that protect Josh Allen don't get as much leeway as, say, a developing corner or a developing receiver, because these people need to be good at their job from the get-go to protect the guy you're paying $256 million, who, if he breaks in half, so does your Super Bowl aspirations and your championship aspirations, everything. So with Brown, I'm not so much against him being on the team, but I'm against him being the starting option at right tackle next year. I think while he is an athletic freak, while there's capability of him being very good in the run blocking scenarios, especially when he goes down the field, and you saw those flashes of brilliance in the last year's playoff run against New England and certain times at Kansas City, there's something there you can work with. But I'm not willing to lean on him or Saffold, but I'm not willing to give up on them totally yet either. Now, I'm an optimist by nature. I'm going to try and squeeze out every bit of usefulness these players can have before I'm saying I'm done with them. I want to let them go. Goodbye. Saffold didn't give me a lot to be encouraged by this year, but it's year one of Aaron Kromer's system. He might have been learning something. He might have been trying to figure it all out and just didn't, and maybe he can next year. But I also think adding the competition of a rookie guard, of a rookie right tackle that can take that, and drive you to be better, or if they win the role, drive you to hone this more limited role you have in the offense to a T, might improve you overall. So I do think it's very important that they nail it in the draft if they do decide to go that route, whether that's going for Torrance, whether that's going for a DeJuan, is it DeJuan Jones? I'm sorry, I'm blanking on his name right now, or Cody Mauch, or any of those guys. That, to me, makes those guys that you were depending on that failed a little bit better. And also, I want to bring up, it worked for Bobby Hart. The jumbo package this year was successful with Bobby Hart. Now, I know that those two words together, those names together, instilled fear upon this fan base when he got brought back. We thought we were done with him. He came back, and guess what? He did well. I think that same thing could happen for Spencer Brown or Roger Saffold or the rest of the offensive line. And if it does, I'll be very happy to see it.
Fair. Yeah. The other thing, there's a lot of offensive linemen that are available in this class. This is actually a good draft class to kind of. Now, the thing is, some of them you're going to have to look at that are coming in as tackles, sort of like a Cody Mauch, but realistically, they're going to be playing guard. And one of those guys that had some questions coming into this combine and ended up kind of still having questions because it was Peter Skoronski from Northwestern, who a lot of people really like. A lot of people are big fans of Peter Skoronski, but the arm length really going to be a tackle, or is he really going to be a guard? Now, if this is one of those things where the questions keep going and going and going, and people aren't 100% sure what to do with him, and he ends up falling in this class, pick with Peter Skoronski. I don't know if that's actually going to happen. I don't think that 26 other teams are going to pass up on him, even if they feel like, he is just a guard. I would imagine someone takes him, but, this is somebody that, like, you almost start to get this sense that, like, the NFL really isn't sure what to do with him, and when the NFL doesn't know what to do, then let them slide and slide and slide and slide. And the Bills might end up being a beneficiary of someone like that. And even if they're not, there's other guys like, I know Eric has been fully in on John Michael Schmitz from I am also very much in on that idea. Somebody that can start at guard, get to center if/when Mitch Morse ends up leaving or retiring, whatever that may be. That's somebody that I think has the mentality that you really want. It's just a really tough player. That's an interesting guy to look at. And then the other position that I wanted to talk about was actually running backs, because you obviously have James Cook last year get drafted in the second round. Started off kind of rough, finished down the stretch really, really well. Somebody that's been on this team for a while, has more or less been the same player that entire time. Never a home run hitter type. Really elusive and brings a lot more leg drive than one might think, but was never going to be a legit game changer. Not that they really needed that at running back, not that they're really seeking like an Adrian Peterson type or that type of player at running back, because you already have Josh Allen, and that kind of gives you your game breaking ability just right there. But you look at running back, and there's a lot of guys at the running back position that are very interesting, whether that's a Tank Bigsby or a Jamar Gibbs or a Bijan Robinson at the 27th overall pick. I am not one of those people, but even somebody like Zach Charbonnet from UCLA, there's guys that could be open. So this team has taken, a running back on day 2 a couple different times now. do you feel more comfortable about taking a again, or do you feel more comfortable maybe with someone like Ronald Winkler says, signing a Deontay Foreman or Jamal Williams?
Yeah, I'll go. I don't want the Bills drafting a running back at all, unless he's in the late, like on day 3, late in the 6th round or something. I just don't see. I think people have this kind of obsession that the Bills need to have a really good running back. Like today, people got all up on Derrick Henry and we're interested in that. And I just don't see the value at all. Like the Bills are a pass first team. They will always be a pass first team as long as Josh Allen's on this roster. Why would I want to spend significant assets on a stud running back? Yeah, it would benefit the Bills. Like last year, if let's say the Bills had gotten Breece Hall, like Breece Hall probably would have done pretty well in the Bills offense. But at the same time, when I look at this team going into this draft, I don't have running back anywhere on my radar. Like I need a guard, I need a linebacker, I need a safety, I need a slot wide receiver, I need all of these other things, and then running backs last. Go sign a veteran running back, let him be RB2 behind James Cook, and then just roll with that. I'm perfectly fine with actually, like, if the Bills ran it back with Devin Singletary and James Cook in the backfield, I know some Bills fans would hate that. I don't care. I'm perfectly fine with that. I think the offense is good enough with those two running backs. They have other issues that are way more pressing than running back to me.
They definitely have issues that are more pressing. I do agree that I wouldn't hate having Singletary back on a cheap deal and Cook, but I also would rather draft than sign someone in free agency for the reason that if this person you draft ends up panning out in a way that you want to help them be a significant part of the offense, you're not really paying as much as you would be a veteran free. And granted, you could say that this money's negligible, but the control you have for the rookie deal for this running back that you draft plus the upside would be worth its weight in gold to me. I don't think a running back is ever going to I don't want to say outrush Josh Allen in this offense, but I don't think it's ever going to be the point of emphasis. So I'm not for trading for a Derrick Henry or trading for, or signing Saquon Barkley or Josh Jacobs to ridiculous money for a running back. But I never mind drafting running back any point in specifically later, because I don't think you should use 27 to take one. But I justify it as this can be a low round pick that can present absurd amounts of value, absurd amounts of upside for a low cost, rather than committing, money, a couple million, they have to pay outright to a veteran running back that now you have for maybe a year, maybe 2 years, and maybe they falter, maybe they do well. You know what you're getting with them. You know the time you have. With a rookie running back, you have them for the rookie contract, and you can get that upside for them without having to spend a lot on them. And then if they pan out, it just bolsters your offense immediately. They're a plug-and-play day one player that you could have gotten in the 6th or 7th round. And there are some options in this draft that could be that for me. So if the Bills go the route of taking a free agent running back, I will not be mad. I love is it Deontay or Dante Foreman? I've actually never heard it pronounced.
I think it's Donta Foreman? Donta, I think. I'm not sure either, to be honest.
There's an apostrophe in there somewhere, so I'm not 100% sure.
I don't want to mispronounce the name, so I'll just Eric Foreman. If we get Eric Foreman for a cheap deal, great. And he's been very good. I think it was Greg who called him, was it decaf Derrick Henry or like dollar store Derrick Henry, something like that. He'll tell me in the chat. But if you go get him, I'm fine with it. But I think there's justification to take a running back late rounds, especially when you have this feeling that you could take the 6th round pick and put him in your offense day one, have him for a few years, and if he contributes, that's your offense for years on cheap deal. So I'm for that.
I don't know why I'm obsessed with this guy, and I don't know how he fits in the Bills offense. I don't know how he fits on the Bills roster at all, but I somehow watched more Kansas State college football games than any other team this year. Yes. I don't know why or how, but Deuce Vaughn, I've never seen a player that small. He dominated every single game he played with Kansas State. Yeah. Like he was their offense at points where it's like, how is this little dude just literally destroying everyone he plays? He's 5'6". How are you 5'6" and dominating in college football? I don't know how he can work in the NFL, how he works on this Bills team, but he's a guy which with that 6th round pick the Bills have, if they took Deuce Vaughn, I'd be like, all right, find a way to use him. I don't know how, but he has to be able to do something after what I saw in college.
Short king.
Yeah. that is absolutely someone that I'm like, all of my like brain intelligence, whatever is left up here that actually thinks like tells me that this is not going to work. But man, you really wanted it to. You're just like this look. It's like this be somebody that can find some sort of role in the NFL. Yeah. So, all right, great discussion. Now, if any of you all in the chat were wondering, with Kyle out, are we really going to get rid of everyone's favorite and most popular segment, Truth or Rubbish? The answer is no, we are not getting rid of it. We're doing it right now.
The truth or rubbish. Let's go.
Let's go. So, we're going to I'm going to be giving you both a statement. Uber, I believe you've done this before. Joe, you have not. So I'm going to be giving you both a statement. I will ask both of you if it is true or rubbish. And the chat, feel free to join in as you do. And we're gonna close out the show with this. So true or rubbish? Stefon Diggs will be a Buffalo Bill in 2023.
I mean, it's a truth. Like it's not.
This was true.
Obviously, he's going to be a Bill. There's no way they're going to trade him. Like these things are getting.
I started with an easy one. This is the thing, right? Where it's like this has become a popular thing because like he was mad because they lost the Bengals game and like left the locker room before anybody got there. It's just like, yeah. And like it's such a stupid non-story. And if you look at like I'm gonna very quickly pull up over the cap because if they try to trade Stefon Diggs, the Bills would incur negative $17 million in cap saving. They would have $17 million in dead cap. Or actually, no, $37 million in dead cap. It would be minus $17 million in cap savings. So it's just absolutely ridiculous. They would lose so much unbelievable money. It's just nothing about that makes any sense. It will never make any sense. And frankly, if you see anyone trying to peddle this stupid ass theory, feel free to shame them and bully them online. That is not the official stance of Cover One. That's just my stance.
But
as someone who had a beer earlier today.
I'm going to say this, and I'll try to keep it brief. This narrative happens every single offseason. It was the same thing last year. It was the same thing the year prior. He does social media vague posting on Twitter and Instagram, and they run with it. It is a non-story. He's not going anywhere. He is going to be a Buffalo Bill next year. He is not oh my God. These guys can get mad after they lose games. They're allowed to. They're humans too, guys. An athlete is not a robot. It's not a concept. It's a human being. He was upset that they lost a playoff game. I would be mad that I lost a playoff game. Josh Allen was probably pissed he lost a playoff game, but you know what? It didn't mean anything more than that. They were mad. They probably argued. It happens in football. It's an emotional game. This is a non-story. He will be a Bill next year, and anyone who is perpetuating that we need to trade him to the Dallas Cowboys needs to stop. It's irresponsible. That's all I'm going to say.
There you go. All right, moving on. True or rubbish? Spencer Brown is the opening week starter for the Buffalo Bills in 2023.
Joe, you can go first because I'm going to have
Joe is giving a big rubbish.
Rubbish all after all. Rubbish.
Uber, I think you and I had a brief discussion about this in the chat.
Yeah.
I do not think he's going to be the opening day starter. Similar to my stance that I talked about before. I just don't think you have the luxury of waiting for him to come around when you need to protect Allen, especially his right side. I think there is tackle talent in the draft that you can get at either 27 or later on. And I think that if you don't go that route and you roll with him, you are going to be complaining about the same issues. Assuming you don't get anyone in free agency, you're going to be complaining about the same issues that you complained about last year. I know he has athletic upside. I know that if it does pan out, it'd probably be glorious. It is year 3. I just don't see it happening.
Yeah, so I think he's going to be the week 1 starter. I'm not saying that as in I'm happy he's going to be the week 1 starter. I just think that that's what's going to happen. I think the Bills are higher on him than we are, than the general public is, because they see this raw, untapped potential of this freak athlete that could be a dominant right tackle, and they still believe in it, and they're going to give him a shot in year 3. They gave Cody Ford a shot in year 3, so I would expect them to give Spencer Brown at least a shot at getting that starting right tackle job. If the Bills go out and sign a right tackle or draft a right tackle that beats out Spencer Brown, I won't be surprised at all. I just think that the Bills are a little higher on him than we are right now.
I would tend to agree with that. So moving on, the Bills will draft a safety in the first 3 rounds of the 2023 NFL Draft. True or rubbish?
I'll go rubbish.
Can I go? All right, we're going rubbish.
It was all
I agree.
All right, explain it.
So my thought process on safety is this. So my dream scenario is Christian Benford is a stud safety. I don't know if that's going to happen. I want it to happen really bad, but I don't know. If there's one position on the entire Bills roster that I don't see Sean McDermott trusting a rookie to play, it'll be safety. Like that's the position that has to dominate in his scheme and that palm scheme that they play. And if you don't have a guy that you can trust or who has been in the system at least for some period of time, whether that be in Buffalo or in a different zone heavy scheme in the NFL, I just can't see the Bills saying like, hey, we're going to take this safety in round 2 and we're going to plug him into this integral role in our defense. And we're just going to roll with that. Do I kind of want to see that happen? Yeah, I'd rather see Benford there, but I think that that's where you're going to see a vet addition, probably on a low salary, at least for a year, to hold that spot for maybe Benford, maybe somebody else down the line.
Yeah, considering that how much they rely on their safeties in this scheme, it would either be a premium pick at the higher part of the draft or not picked at all to me, because they are going to want someone who's surefire there. The fact that in Bean's presser, he mentioned Benford by name and talked about his hybrid capability and talked about the fact that he could play safety made me a lot more, not sure, but a lot more suspecting that they're going to try it. And they tried it with Cam Lewis. And they love the guys that can go back and forth. And if you look at Micah Hyde's track record, he went from corner to safety, and it worked out pretty well. It might work for Christian Benford, but I don't think that they're going to draft one unless they surprise us and take top tier safety at 27. I just don't see it.
I think this is going to be That's probably the thing I'm going to be focusing the most on this offseason, just because I want to see a lot of changes there. But ultimately, I feel confident that they will do something with the offensive line. Whereas with safety, you feel like they're going to do something. It's just like, is that something going to be sign someone on a cheap veteran deal or draft someone in the second round or whatever? Yeah. Or just switch Christian Benford and feel super confident in Christian Benford. I don't know. This is the most like mysterious part of the offseason to me for the Bills, where I'm just not even close to sure what they're going to actually end up doing. I could totally see a safety in the first 3 rounds. I could totally see them just waiting until round 7 and be like, yeah, just grab someone there. It's a bit of a crapshoot in my opinion.
And I think they had the plan. And it was working out perfectly. And then tragedy struck in Cincinnati when Hamlin went down. That was the plan all along, was Hamlin was going to be the heir apparent to Jordan Poyer. And then just, by the will of whatever being, that terrible thing happened. And now Hamlin may retire. He may never play again, which to what you said earlier, I'd be perfectly fine with that if he never plays again. If he wants to play and the doctors have cleared him, then feel free, like, go, let's try this. But it reset their plans. Now they have to go back to the drawing board and find another way to do it in a much shorter period of time, because I honestly can't see Poyer coming back. I'd love to have Poyer back, but I just don't see it.
The way I think they're going to do that too is the same way they brought Poyer in, is look for that safety that no one's talking about or no one really speculates about and bring him in. And Eric, I bring up Eric in probably every single thing I do, just because he always points it out, and then I'll watch it and be like, oh, Ryan Neal from Seattle. If they get that kid, I'm all in.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be. I would be kind of surprised if he left Seattle because he was a major part of what they were able to do last year. And that defense doesn't have a ton of players on it at the moment. I would be a little surprised if they let him go, but you never know in free agency. All right, last one. You do not have to answer this question. I will answer this question if neither of you will. So, if hypothetically speaking, of course. If there was a Bills beat reporter that would shoo away a junior reporter, that person would have been Jerry Sullivan if he didn't say women were dumb.
Yes.
This was true all after all. Couldn't believe it. It was true.
Couldn't believe it. It was true. All right, we're going to end on that. Thank you all for joining us on the Cover One Roundup. Hopefully, we will have Kyle back next week for a free agency preview. Free agency will start up on the 16th, I want to say, or the 14th, something like that, sometime next week. It's going to be coming in fast and furious because the so-called legal tampering period has been well and started. Actually, the illegal tampering period, if you want to call it, is already well and started. So you're going to see deals coming in right at 12:01 or whatever, the minute after the bell rings, basically. So be prepared for a whole lot of panic and frenzy, and don't be prepared for a new Von Miller type of deal because that's probably not going to happen. That's going to be it for us this week. We are, of course, as usual, brought to you by a number of different things. Underdog Fantasy, go check them out. If you use promo code Cover1, that gets you $100 free play. If you go to BetUS, they'll hook you up there as well. We obviously have Cover1 Pass again that gets you all sorts of premium content with us. It gets you the Slack channel. Again, it's a great deal, $57 a year. I mean, it's less than $5 a month. This is phenomenal stuff, and you get to support us and what we do and all the stuff that we're able to have access to. In addition, to both Joe and Mr. Hansen for joining me tonight. Joe, where can the people find you on the good old Bird app?
Yes, so you can find me at Joe DeRosa, which is right below. I am hosting Cover One's new show, new roundtable talk show, Under Review, every Saturday at 11 a.m. Me, a Cover One person, maybe multiple Cover One people, and a special guest sit down and talk about whatever topic I pick. So for all of you watching right now, all of you who are into Cover One, I'm the new guy. Come check me out on Saturdays at 11 a.m.
That is all very true. Uber, where can the people find you on the good old Elon Musk app?
Yeah, you can find me at Uber Hansen, tweeting out nonsense pretty much nonstop, every day, all day. I have an obsession, which actually made me purchase Twitter Blue, which I am ashamed of, but I had to do it. The next piece of content that I just want to plug is I do every year this a post for our NFL, the NFL subreddit called it's 32 teams of 32 days, Buffalo Bills. It's a comprehensive recap of the entire last season. I do it with a couple other people. Last year's post was a total of 38 pages. This year's will probably be somewhere around that. That comes out Monday morning, so March 13th. So look out for that. I'll tweet that out, and it'll also be on our NFL and our Buffalo Bills.
You can find me over on the good old Twitter at DFAUXY or at DFoxy. As RJ says, everyone should be hitting that like button. It always helps, and we do appreciate likes, comments, subscribe here on YouTube, subscribe on iTunes, leave a review there, subscribe on Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe there, leave a 5-star review, or leave an actual honest review. I appreciate either one. That is going to be it for tonight. Thank you. Bye-bye.